Do you believe in alternate universes?
You are listening to Delayed Replay.
The improvised movie review podcast. Wink.
Everything is fine here. We're all fine. Just sit tight and listen to them talk about the movies they definitely saw.
Don't delay. We have to listen right away.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we talk about some of the most recent movies. Sometimes they came out like a few months ago or weeks ago, or maybe rarely it's opening weekend. On this episode, we're talking about Morbius, which came out in July. And with me, he has written some novels in the Star Trek, Marvel, DC, Planet of the Apes franchises, and much more, probably. It is Greg Cox. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, like I was trying to think of who to have on this Morbius episode, and I feel like you're probably the biggest Morbius fan that I know.
Well, as you know, and we have actually discussed this in the past, Morbius is one of my favorite characters. I will cop to writing Morbius fan fiction back in high school, and am still shamelessly proud of the fact that I actually sold a Morbius story to Marvel Comics many years ago that appeared in Web of Spider-Man issue 120. I looked up the number right before this podcast just to make sure I had that number right. So yeah, I grew up reading the Morbius comics in Vampire Tales and Adventures into Fear. And at the risk of dating myself, I remember picking up Spider-Man number 101, the first appearance of Morbius at 7-Eleven when I was a kid. I took my bike up to 7-Eleven, got a Slurpee, and bought Spider-Man number 101, which was the first appearance of Morbius the Living Vampire. So, yes, I was waiting from bated breath for the movie. So
Nice, and it only took a few decades, but it finally came. So what was it that drew you to like the Morbius character back in the day when you were reading those comics?
Honestly, I think it was because it was pushing two of my buttons at once. I'm a horror fan and I like superhero comics. So, oh my God, vampires and comic books. This is like, Reese's Pieces,
Yes.
peanut butter and chocolate book. Two of my favorite things, a comic book superhero vampire. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean there's a time when comics started focusing on horror, like I think that was like in the 70s, like you had like Swamp Thing and all sorts of other things popping up, which was interesting.
Well, there was a whole Marvel horror boom, which hit just in time for my adolescence, where you had, Werewolf by Night, Monster of Frankenstein, Tomb of Dracula, Blade the Vampire Slayer, Son of Satan, Ghost Rider, on and on. And actually, the reason for this was because there was a change in the Comic Code. When the Comic Code Authority was set up in the 50s, vampires, werewolves, ghouls, zombies, they were all banned from comic books. Because this was in the backlash against the violent horror comics of the 50s, Tales from the Crypt. In the 70s, they finally revised the Comic Code and opened the door to vampires, werewolves, monsters, etc. Although, oddly enough, zombies remained off limits at that time. And Marvel jumped on this. And I think Morbius was their first kind of tentatively putting their toe into the horror waters. Oh, let's do a vampire character in Spider-Man. It was kind of making kind of a comic book superhero. And I guess that then beget more aggressively horror stuff like Monster of Frankenstein, Werewolf by Night, Ghost Rider, Tomb of Dracula, Vampire Tales, Lilith, Daughter of Dracula, etc. And of course, Morbius, who started out, just as a historical lesson, as a Spider-Man villain, quickly was promoted into his own strips. In fact, at one point, he had two rival series going on with completely different continuities. There was a black and white series in Vampire Tales, written by Don McGregor, and there was a color comic book in Adventures into Fear, written largely by Steve Gerber, and these were sort of, so if you were a teenage Morbius fan, you could, read the black and white magazine or the color comic book.
Nice. Like, as you're mentioning the comic strips, I, thought of a pun, which is Morbius strips, because, the Mobius strip is something that was mentioned in Endgame, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember, any of the types of stories you wrote when, you were doing Morbius fan fiction way back then?
Oh, yeah. I actually reread a bunch of it recently, because actually when we were clearing out my parents' old house, because they were, moving into retirement community, I found, actually, a cache of it. And honestly, I was largely into doing crossovers. So it was Morbius meets Blade, Morbius meets Lilith. Morbius runs into Son of Satan, etc. Morbius, Son of Satan runs into Man Thing. I was having fun doing mini crossovers of my favorite characters.
That's kind of funny because when I wrote fan fiction as a kid, and in elementary and then later in high school, I was really into doing crossovers as well. I would put the Star Wars characters in Middle Earth or Middle Earth in Narnia or something, and it was weird.
One of my oldest memories, and sadly I don't think this is no copies survive, but I remember as a kid writing a Charlie Brown meets Dracula crossover.
Oh, wow.
The Peanuts gang met the monster. I think it was called Good Grief Monsters. Yeah. Charlie Brown, Snoopy, and Linus meeting Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman. Again, me just grabbing my favorite things and smushing them together,
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, they're peanuts, so it's you gotta get the peanut butter, put it with the chocolate, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
I would totally love to see a Peanuts crossover with Dracula. That would be amazing.
I vividly remember Linus using his towel as a sort of a whip, to snapping it and knocking Dracula in bat form out of the sky.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I think in high school I wrote Spider-Man fan fiction. It was my own take on what I thought Sam Raimi's next trilogy would have been like, and I included Morbius in there, even though I knew very little about him, and Man-Wolf was in there too, and it was something. I think my writing style back then wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but I could have used more refining. I'd only read one Morbius comic in my entire life, I think. In 2013, there was this new Morbius series, I think only lasted 9 issues, but I got the first one because the cover looked amazing. It had this gothic look to it, but then it's one of those classic instances where you buy the comic book issue because the cover looks cool, but then the interior art doesn't look as good as you were hoping. It was fine, it just didn't have that gothic look I would have preferred. And I think I even remember someone in the store, he was telling his friend or someone who works at the store, he was oh yeah, the Morbius series is cool, I guess. I just wish it was darker. But yeah, I never got past that first issue because I wasn't as adept at going out and buying comics and whatnot. So if I ever do revisit that series, it's not too daunting. It's just several issues, so it might be worth checking out.
At this point, yeah, there's been several generations of Morbius comics. Yeah, every decade or so puts out a new series. I think there was one that was running, no doubt. With the movie in the works, Marvel wanted to have Morbius comics in the stores, and I've been seeing some reprint collections and things. And yeah, some of them have been darker and more vigilante-oriented, and some of them have been more gothic. And I remember in the 70s, like I said, there were 2 simultaneous Morbius series. And one of them, the black and white one was kind of very horror and gothic and evil satanic cults and such, whereas I think the color comic, the one that was, sold at spin racks at 7-Eleven, had more sci-fi comic book plots with supervillains and even alien invaders and, creatures from other dimensions. So there were kind of 2 different approaches.
Nice. Yeah, with comics, you can go in all sorts of different directions. So it's kind of the pendulum swings one way and then the other.
I remember noticing even as a teen that Morbius's character personality had a tendency to vary a bit from when he where he appeared. In his own books, he was more tortured anti-hero, whereas when he popped up back again in Spider-Man, he would somehow slide a little bit back more into comic book supervillain mode and dialogue. Curse you, Spider-Man, whatever. Tortured, angsty vampire in, his own book, and sort of, I will stop,
Yeah.
Though the whole sort of I'm tortured by my origin thing is, was always there. Which the new movie, in fact, obviously has picked up on, tragic accident, trying to cure himself, etc.
Yeah, when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I think I was at Disneyland back in January. Like, my brother and our friend, I was with them, and we went to Galaxy's Edge, the Star Wars portion of the park. And, like, the trailer dropped, and I tried watching it on my phone. I don't think I had my earbuds handy, or if I did, it was, like, still too loud with, like, the crowd around me. And so I played the trailer, and I was like, I guess that's fine. Like, I wasn't really sure what was going on in it. But when I watched the trailer again months later, like, it's a really well-cut trailer. It really gets the blood pumping and has that, I think it's Beethoven music, at least Fur, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, just sets, like, the dark horror tone of the movie.
And, with allowing the usual latitude, I recognize that, oh yeah, that's more or less the setup from, the movie, though of course, from the original comics. Though of course, as in the manner of things, they're obviously taking their time and fleshing out. I think in the original Spider-Man comic, Morbius's origin was handled in about 3 pages,
Right.
Brilliant scientist, tragically dying of blood succeed. Hey, let's try radioactive bat blood. That might cure me. What could go wrong? There's a lot of room there to flesh it out and introduce the character before the experiment goes badly, badly wrong.
Yeah, like, this movie very much dives into that old trope. It can be a well done trope of, like, someone becomes a monster and they have this internal struggle of, like, am I still a good person, or am I just doomed to be evil or whatever? And that's kind of one thing I liked about the MCU's Incredible Hulk movie, which I think is underrated. And yeah, I don't know, there's just something about those types of stories that is just fun for me to watch.
Well, even Doctor Strange, I really liked the Doctor Strange movie. And one of the things I liked is, again, if you go back and look at the original Stan Lee, Steve Ditko story, Strange's backstory is all covered in about 1 page. The whole business, arrogant surgeon, tragic accident, my hands are ruined, I'll never work again, I'm going to wander off to forest, seek a healer. I liked how they took that sort of bear thing, which indeed the original comic, I think, ran through in about 8 panels, and made a whole story, and let's flesh this out and introduce the story, and taking him on this whole arc, which the original comic story was, okay, here's his origin, here's 1 page, now on to our next exciting adventure,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with comics, right? Like, for example, you had Batman, and his origin, like, was covered in a couple of pages back in the late 30s, early 40s, and then, like, much later you get more of that, including, like, one of the more popular ones, which is Batman Year One back in the 80s. So it's kind of neat that in comics you can find all these nooks and crannies and expand and flesh them out a bit.
Especially compared to the original stories, which were just kind of quickly moving along. I mean, even Doctor Strange, as I recall, they didn't even get around to giving him an origin until, like, his 5th appearance. Originally, he was just this spooky guy living in Greenwich Village. They call me Doctor Strange, And then, we should give him an origin. But again, Iron Man, I think the whole backstory of arrogant war financier, oops, was, 1 or 2 panels. Indeed, even it's fascinating to go back and see how all this stuff has been fleshed out over the generations, both by subsequent comic book writers and artists, but also by the movies and the media. Spider-Man, Uncle Ben. I think Uncle Ben is around for about 3 panels in the original Spider-Man story, Just enough, hey, how you doing, young man? Great, And again, the whole relationship is set up in about, whereas when you're doing a movie, you have to hire Cliff Robertson or somebody to flesh out the character,
Yeah, I mean, that was a great performance from Cliff Robertson. And it's like, it adds a lot of weight to the situation. And I remember rereading that original story, maybe it was 3 years ago, but yeah, I guess Uncle Ben isn't in it as much. And I don't know if like the weight that I felt was just from me having experienced the movies or what, but it's like, that's an iconic moment in Peter Parker's life. And
Well, the moment, in the original comic, like I said, Uncle Ben, death is a major big deal, and it works in the original comic. But again,
yeah,
they were doing very sort of compressed storyline. There's like, here's 2 panels of his beloved Uncle Ben, tousling his hair, and you go there and have some big breakfast,
yeah,
Peter. And then I think the original story is only about 8 pages long. It's not, it was it was just one of many stories in Amazing Fantasy 5.
yeah.
But it gives you all these room to, like, build and add. And it's one of the fun things about the whole collaborative superhero genre is stuff gets piled. And it's sort of amazing to realize that, oh, wait a second, Daredevil, Elektra was not introduced until after the character was around for 20 years or so. Harley Quinn did not come around until the 90s. Magneto's whole concentration camp backstory, which seems essential to the character now, popped up in the the character was around for 20 years before that was part of his backstory.
Yeah, there are just these things that become staples over time to the point where it feels like they've been around from the beginning, which is kind of weird.
Like occasionally I even see people, why didn't they have Harley Quinn on the original 1960s TV series? Well, she wouldn't be invented for another 30 years.
Yeah. Oh man, now I'm trying to imagine what a 1960s Harley Quinn would have been on television back then. Like, who would have played her?
I've actually thought about this, and okay, she should have been played by Tuesday Weld, but okay, that's just me. But and Anne Margaret should have played Poison Ivy. Okay, but
all right. Yeah, I've been meaning to watch more of that Adam West TV show. Like, I saw bits of it as a kid when it was on Nick at Night, and I've seen clips here and there, but at some point I want to watch the show from beginning to end, like, for fun.
Yeah, I remember it debuting back in the day. And yeah, I can testify to the fact that us kids back in the 60s did not pick up on the fact that it was campy. We took it utterly seriously, the cliche that, the adults were laughing at the campiness and the kids were into the costumes and the gadgets and the Batmobile. Oh yeah, oh no, what's going to happen to Batman this week,
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has its place in the whole, like the history of Batman and whatnot.
Well, I think the nice thing is, and we're going on digressing here, I think we now have the luxury of appreciating it as its own thing. Now that the comic genre has moved on and it's not defining, there was a period there where if you were a comic fan, you kind of had mixed feelings about the thing because it casts a very long shadow. For about a generation afterwards, there was the idea that the only way you could do comic books was campy, and it was to the point where it was almost impossible to read an article in the mainstream media about comic books that didn't begin zap bam pow, holy collectability, Batman. So when it defined comic books and Batman in the general media, grumble, what's that, But now, of course, we're post Michael Keaton, MCU. It's like, oh, we can enjoy it on its own terms again without having to explain that no, that it's not the sum total of Batman in the popular imagination,
Right. Since we've had multiple on-screen incarnations now, it's like the campier versions are not the final word, and it's like if they're not for you, there are these other versions you can check out.
Exactly. For a while, there was a period where outside of fandom, that was the image. You mentioned Batman. In fact, I remember going to see the 1989 movie with 2 different groups of friends. I went and saw it with some nerdy comic book friends, and we were all, oh my God, this is great, and thank God it's not a camp fest. Then, however, this is interesting. I went to go see it with some co-workers from the office, and they came out of it kind of bemused. Where was the zap bam pows? They honestly were kind of confused. They went expecting it wasn't as why wasn't it funny? That was what they expected. But nowadays we're that's well in the past, and we're 7 or 8 Batmans past that, and any number of other superhero movies,
Yeah. So I think Morbius, like this Morbius movie, definitely leans more toward in like the more serious type of stuff than campy type of stuff. But it's not like the Dark Knight trilogy where they try to make it feel like it could happen in real life. Like they do have some science-y stuff, but they also like have like these supernatural elements in the movie, which I really appreciated.
They actually looked like they were playing at the horror elements, so in some ways it's perhaps they're more comparable to the Blade movies.
Yeah.
I suspect that a lot of people, when they saw the Blade movies, had no idea it was based on a comic book,
Right. And yeah, so Morbius begins, like, we get, like, this origin story of the character, how he had, like, this rare blood disease ever since he was a kid. And, he becomes a scientist and he tries to cure himself. And to do this, he goes to this, like, foreign place where there's, like, a bat cave. And, like, he gets out the knife and, like, does a cut on his hand and summons the bats. And as cool as the shot as it is, it's hard not to think of Batman when seeing that, especially because like Jared Leto played a Joker in Suicide Squad, and like I also remembered that like he and Christian Bale were both in American Psycho, where Christian Bale played Patrick Bateman, and Bateman almost sounds like Batman, so it's like while I was watching this movie, I had these like connections in mind, and I was also trying to like let the movie distract me from the fact that it's Jared Leto, because I didn't like the behind the scenes stuff I heard about Suicide Squad, but I think the movie did a decent enough. Like the movie did a decently good job of making me like focus more on the story and like buy into like, yeah, this is the character Morbius, and not think too much about like the actor, I guess.
Well, I think when it comes to Batman, invariably it's going to be hard to do a superhero who gets his powers from bat blood.
Yeah.
And not and indeed the whole vampire Batman thing. It's Batman runs around in a black cape and he dresses as a bat. There's a bit of a Dracula vibe going there, and now it kind of circles around. It's kind of like Batman has kind of a vampire vibe, and then you get you've got a dark comic book superhero who gets his powers from radioactive bat blood or whatever, and you're going to have some thematic I'll bet you he's gonna you're gonna have him lurking in the dark and striking terror and like Batman, because Batman's a bat and Morbius is really a bat, and
Yeah, one of Batman's earliest foes was this vampire called the Monk. Like, it was kind of a weird story because, the Monk was like a vampire and he could turn into a wolf, if I remember correctly. And it ends with like Batman using a gun to like shoot him and his assistant, who's also a vampire, to death. And it's like weird to think about now in this day and age where people are like, oh, Batman should not use a gun and whatnot. So, like, if I were ever to make a Batman series or film series or whatever, I mean, this is never gonna happen, but if I were, like, given control of something like that, I would include the Monk early on and make it so that, like, Batman does use a gun on him, and also Hugo Strange's Monster Men, like he does in the comics, but that would be like part of his development where he's like, it does not feel good to like shoot these monsters. So like they're monsters, but they used to be people, and like I'll never use a gun again, and that would be like part of his development. Like I think that'd be pretty cool to see.
I'm still waiting for a live action Man Bat.
Yes.
But whom to see in the movies someday. But again, and indeed, we could argue, staying on topic, that indeed, so, Batman, Man Bat, Morbius. Okay, so, got a guy who gets his powers from bats, It's interesting. Whereas Blade, I mentioned, I think a lot of people went and saw Blade because it was a great kick-ass vampire movie, not because of the comic book connection. It's hard to miss from the trailer that there's, in conjunction with Marvel, from the studio that brought you Venom.
Yeah.
He's a Spider-Man villain. Look, so it's funny that the days, so that's actually a selling point these days, that he's in fact he's a vampire, and he's a comic book character, and he's a Marvel character.
Yeah, like Marvel and DC are like the mainstream nowadays, which I just love, And
oh yeah, it's for those of us who, like I said, grew up. This stuff was esoteric. It was like, wow, if I could go back in time and tell 12-year-old Greg that one day, Ant-Man and the Wasp would be getting a movie, that the Scarlet Witch and the Vision would have their own TV show. We're not talking, okay, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, whatever. No, oh my God, we're getting, Guardians of the Galaxy movies, Doctor Strange movies, and these are big deals, and everyone in the universe knows who Groot is. And Morbius, I mean, honestly, I would have, back in the 70s, the idea that a character like Morbius, who, like I said, personal favorite, but let's be honest, was never a household name the way the Hulk or Spider-Man or Wonder Woman was. The idea that, my God, Morbius is getting his own feature movie, what era are we living in? Okay.
Yeah.
I have been waiting my entire lifetime for this pop cultural moment to come around.
Yeah. Yeah, like, we've gotten to a point where they're exploring more niche characters. Like, even Peacemaker, who's going to be in the next Suicide Squad movie, is getting his own TV series on HBO Max. And he's going to be played by John Cena. So that's pretty wild.
A friend of mine, Paul Kupperberg, who used to write Peacemaker, was, gloating about it, was enjoying it very much today, on Facebook. But yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that is still boggled that, oh my God, they just, and also the whole DC TV universe. Oh my God, it's Brainiac 5. It's,
and they did Crisis on
Duo
Infinite
Damsel,
Earth.
or yes, a TV production of, Crisis on Infinite Earth. I mean, at this point, I'm not going to rule out anything. I mean, Manphibian could be getting his own series. Guardians of the Galaxy are the extreme case. I remember Guardians of the Galaxy were never, prior to recent years, prior to Star-Lord becoming Chris Pratt, Star-Lord was pretty damn obscure character. Gamora, Star-Lord, Groot, Rocket Raccoon, these are all pretty obscure characters, Suddenly there are household names and there's lunchboxes and beach towels,
Yeah, we even have like the Doom Patrol TV show, and even Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man, or whatever he's called, appears in it. Like, they're just leaning into like the weirdness of it, and I love it.
The Stargirl series, which I'm loving, very deeply rooted in comic book, DC lore and the Justice Society of America. And there was a reference, for God's sakes, what was her name? Mary Girl of a Thousand Gimmicks. I think, did they just reference Mary Girl of a Thousand Gimmicks?
Yeah.
Who's a pretty damn obscure, golden age DC heroine. Wow. I never thought I would actually see Mary Girl of a Thousand Gimmicks referenced on a mainstream television series in prime time,
Yeah.
And I will not rest until we actually get a flashback that shows Mary Girl of a Thousand Gimmicks,
I mean, it's possible, like they've surprised us with a lot, so you never know.
Well, that's kind of the exciting things about Morbius is, wow, if we're getting Morbius, well, who's next and what can they do in, future Morbius movies? I mean, does this mean we're going to, I mentioned that there was this whole Marvel monster boom in the 70s. If we're getting Morbius, well, can Werewolf by Night, can Satana, the Devil's Daughter, I joke about the Manphibian, who was Marvel's version of the Creature of the Black Lagoon, who's my go-to whenever I want to drag a really obscure Marvel character out of the ether and show off my Marvel cred. But, wow, Monster of Frankenstein, Werewolf by Night, Man-Wolf, you mentioned Man-Wolf.
Yeah.
In fact, is J. Jonah Jameson's son, so he's got the whole Spider-Man connection going there. Probably only a matter of time until we get Man-Wolf, There was Lilith, daughter of Dracula. There was, and I'm sure we're going to get a revival of Blade at some point, They've even cast the new Blade. It's been announced.
Yeah, I think his last name is Ali. I forget what his first name is, though.
He has a very long name, which unfortunately I'm reluctant to try to pronounce out loud. But yeah, no, he's a really great actor. He was on the 4400 years ago and has since went on to like do acclaimed Academy Award winning movies and things. And yeah, I'm too much of a wimp to try to actually pronounce his multi-syllabic first name, you know.
Yeah, I looked his name up recently and even looked up the pronunciation, but I forgot it. So,
but like I said, no, he's great. I remember him. Like I said, these days I don't think anyone else remembers him as the guy from the 4400 because no one remembers the 4400 anymore. And he's since gone on to bigger and better things in major motion pictures and Academy Award nominations and I think he's actually won a couple Oscars at least. You know, I wrote some of the 4400 novels back in the day, so I remember writing his character. So he's still the 4400 guy to me. So
nice. Were they 4,400 pages total?
Much shorter than that, actually.
Oh.
I was not writing 4,000-page books, no.
Yeah, that would be something.
Those would be impressive tie-in novels. Okay, you know.
Okay, so getting back to the Morbius movie. So he experiments on himself, and he also has a fiance named Martine Bancroft. And so, like, she's somewhat supportive, but also, like, questioning whether what he is doing is safe. But he just, like, really wants to cure himself. And, like, at first, it seems like he is cured, but then, like, the next morning, he, like, gets up and walks over to the mirror, and he doesn't see his reflection. And, like, this scene right here spawned some really funny memes. Like, you'd have, like, a screenshot of Morbius looking in the mirror, and there's, like, no reflection, and people would comment, oh, it's Drax in the mirror, or it's Invisible Woman, or it's John Cena, and just stuff like that. And that was very funny.
Okay, that's funny. Back in the original comics, the shtick was he was a scientific vampire. He was a living vampire because he was created by a science experiment. So he didn't have the supernatural stuff. Crosses didn't affect him. He had a reflection. All the magic stuff wasn't there. The whole thing was he was the sci-fi vampire.
Right.
And I think originally that was Marvel, like I said, being a little hesitant about stepping fully into the gothic horror realm because of the Comic Code Authority. But, you know, the shtick was that there were regular vampires like Dracula and Lilith and such. And then he was the living vampire. And yeah, he needed blood and he was sensitive to, you know, but he couldn't turn into a bat and he wasn't scared of holy water or anything, you know.
Right. But we do see, like, later in the movie that he gets, like, his face becomes bat-like, which is really cool to see. What'd you think of how his face looked during those moments?
That glimpse we see of him when he turns around in the Cure. Yeah, that's like, you know, that's your classic Morbius look with the pale white face and the fangs, and that's from the cover of any number of, you know, Morbius comics. Eventually, he attains a point where he looks like the character from the comics, which is great.
Yeah, it's like very gratifying to see stuff go directly from the page to the screen like that. He has these abilities, like I guess he has like high speed and agility, I think is how they described it. And of course, he's also hungry for like blood, like vampires would be. And so, needless to say, he's very concerned about these cravings.
This is an unnecessary side effect. Yes.
Yeah, it's like if you get like a medicine bottle that's titled vampirism, it'd be like side effects may include hunger for blood or something like that. I don't know.
I'm suddenly envisioning one of those pharmaceutical commercials you see all the time, which always end with a horrible, terrible, you know, some sufferers may suffer from painful bleeding and, you know, may end to loss of life, insanity, and cannibalism or whatever. So in this case, it's like, you know, cures your blood disease. Side effects may include an uncontrollable lust for human blood and, you know, pallid skin and fangs, you know, and orthodontic issues.
Right. Yeah, so Morbius also has this friend named Lucius Crown, and he also had like the same blood disease that he has, and he asks Morbius if he can like use what he used on himself, but like Morbius is like trying to hide the fact that he's a vampire now, and he's like warning him that like, oh, the cure is no good, but like Lucius is like very desperate, and like eventually he like breaks into the lab and like tries using the cure on himself, and he himself becomes a vampire. And he's played by Matt Smith, which I thought was cool because like there's a scene where he says aloud, "What is lurking in the brain of Morbius?" And "Brain of Morbius" is the title of an old Doctor Who serial from the
Oh
70s.
God, I never made that connection. Yeah, you're right.
What'd you think of Matt Smith's performance?
Well, it's interesting. I'm less familiar with the Loxias character. I actually looked him up last night. Apparently, he was introduced back in 1997. So this goes to that we were talking about things get added onto him. I think I admit I was sort of like, who is this Loxian Crown guy? I guess I missed the storyline in 1997. He wasn't in the original version of the origin back in the 70s. But yeah, no, there's this cool, hey, and that gives you real, sci-fi cred, bringing in a Doctor Who, no less, So, and it makes sense, again, instead of, if you want to have Morbius, if you're going to have a hero who's a monster, the way to make him sympathetic, more sympathetic and more heroic, is to introduce a monster who is even worse. You need an evil, worse living vampire to give Morbius a challenge, and to make Morbius perhaps look a little bit better.
Yeah, because Lucius, he eventually calls himself Hunger, because like there's a moment where he's like, "I have an insatiable hunger," and like it's very on the nose, wink wink, nudge nudge, and he like goes after like just anyone, even if they're innocent people, whereas Morbius is trying to like only go after bad people in this movie. And so they have to kind of go toe to toe. And like Morbius also has this mentor played by Jared Harris, and he's trying to keep his advice in mind and trying to be like a good person and whatnot. And all the while, there are these two FBI agents, Alberto Rodriguez and Simon Stroud, who are like doing this manhunt against Morbius when they find evidence of like a crime scene where like there are criminals whose blood has been like taken and whatnot. And like there's a scene with these FBI agents where like they're talking in a gray room, and it has like that noir feel to it. Did you get those vibes as well?
Well, anytime you're getting sort of into sort of the sort of dark, creepier end of things, you sort of like Blade, like I said, what we are doing here is, with characters like Morbius and Blade, you're kind of straddling the line between horror and the sort of the darkiness and colorful superhero adventure. And so it's going to, and a very same thing with Batman. Again, Batman can be fighting, Martians with the Justice League, or you can go for a very dark noir detective look. So, Bat characters who are running around in dark shadows. Oh my goodness, vampires again.
Yes.
I was also getting a bit of there's the Underworld movies, which were set contemporary, which were also sort of on one level action movies, but also had the same sort of muted color scheme and dark, and vampires in leather fighting each other and action, and so I was getting a bit of a Underworld vibe.
Right, and you've written Underworld related stuff, right?
I wrote the novelizations of the first 3 Underworld movies, and as well as one solo Underworld novel. So yeah, Underworld was a big part of my life. But yeah, Underworld is another movie that works as a horror movie and as sort of as opposed to say your traditional vampire, a lot of an action movie. There's a lot of jumping around. And indeed, Celine, who's the protagonist of the Underworld movies, is arguably a superhero. She's got superpowers. She runs around in a type leather suit. She smashes through windows, fights werewolves, and has super strength, and does even your classic superhero landing of sort of jumping off buildings and landing, 3-point landing and everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said, in those movies, if Morbius is again kind of, action movie, superhero, comic book adventure movie, but also with a horror pulp, noir feel to it, And like I said, that worked for Blade, that worked for the Underworld movies.
Yeah, it's got a good mix of like different genres in it. Like it has a great vibe to it. And there are also these like connections to other Marvel things. Like when Morbius is on the run, you see like in the alley there's like some graffiti and like there's like a picture of Spider-Man and like the word murderer is like written over it. So that's like a reference to the end of Far From Home. And eventually Morbius finds somewhat of an ally in Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, although they kind of don't say his name out loud right away. Like this is kind of a weird movie because it feels like there's some parts that were shot when they weren't sure what they could reference and parts that were shot when they were sure what they could reference. Like whenever...
Wait, are you saying that Michael Keaton is not playing Bruce Wayne in this movie?
Right.
Oh, right, okay.
Jared Leto facing another Batman.
Yeah. Yeah, you see, you can't get away from Batman. Okay.
Right.
Oh, look, it's the Joker talking to Batman. Okay. Oh, wait, no, it's Morbius talking to Michael Keaton playing
Vulture. Yeah. The casting really messes with our heads in this movie, but yeah.
So you're not my Joker,
Right.
Oh yeah, well, you're not my Batman. Okay.
Yeah, like this is its own Crisis on Infinite Earths type of thing. Yeah, it's kind of weird because there are scenes where Morbius is talking to him, but like whenever it shows him talking to him, it shows like the back of his head with his hood up. So it feels like these were shot in two different locations, which is weird. But when he talks to Michael Keaton, like he basically makes this reference to like the MCU where he's like, one moment you're in prison, and then snaps his fingers, and then he's like, just like that, a few years later, you're right outside of prison and finally free. And I guess that's like a reference to like, maybe he got snapped by Thanos, and when he reappeared, he was like right outside of the prison and got free. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, like I said, in terms of these connections, I would almost, lay odds that when we get to Morbius 2, the adventure continues, that Man-Wolf is going to show up, because not only is Man-Wolf another Marvel monster character, he is a Marvel monster character who is specifically tied into the Spider-Man mythos, since he's J. Jonah Jameson's son, so how they could resist, tying again as into, are we looking at a Morbius Venom crossover at some points, or even a down the road Marvel supervillain Avengers movie where
right,
Morbius teams up with Venom, who teams up with Man-Wolf and Hunger or whoever else I guess when it comes to bringing in Marvel monster characters, as I understand the legalities, they're kind of limited to the ones who are linked to Spider-Man specifically, and who maybe first appeared in Spider-Man, which would be Man-Wolf, Venom, the more hey, there's the Lizard, you can do the Lizard.
Yeah.
The Lizard's another Marvel monster. And in fact, technically, actually, historically, going back, Morbius's very second appearance, which was in, Amazing Spider-Man number 102, was a three-way battle between Spider-Man, Morbius, and the Lizard. So there's a whole history there,
Oh, nice.
Morbius was fighting the Lizard by his second appearance,
Yeah, and I know you haven't seen the Venom movie.
I have been remiss.
But Jameson's son, who's an astronaut, does appear in that movie, albeit unconscious, if I recall correctly.
Well, in that case, if you've already laid the groundwork, as we all know, he becomes Man-Wolf, so the character's already right there,
Yeah, they could totally do that.
Yeah, and it would almost be surprising if, I think the odds are good because they've got the character. He's a Spider-Man villain. He's a monster. You've got the connection to Spider-Man already. And in fact, indeed, in the comics, Morbius and Man-Wolf have butted heads on occasion, And I wouldn't be, so fine, the Dark Spider-Man Villain Alliance,
Yeah.
You end just, we were joking the other day, you have to end, a Morbius movie with a post-credit sequence where, hi, I want to talk to you about the Midnight Suns initiative,
Right.
or the Legion of Monsters initiative, which was another. So now I'm trying to think, okay, what other Marvel characters? I guess, they keep talking about a Black Cat movie. You could, Black Cats are she's not a monster.
Black Cat and
Black Cats
Silver
are spooky,
Sable,
Halloween, witches. So let's team Morbius up with the Black Cat and Venom and Man-Wolf. And the Lizard.
Yeah.
A lot of Spider-Man villains are kind of monstery, honestly. Dr. Octopus, the Scorpion. They haven't got to the Scorpion yet,
Right, like Matt Gargan appears at the very end of Homecoming, so maybe he'll appear.
God, you're right, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's the Scorpion. Right.
Yeah, so that could be interesting. So Morbius and Michael Keaton gets like his Vulture technology. It looks different from how it looks in Homecoming, but it's like, he can fly and whatnot, and they team up to like fight against Lucius Crown. And what did you think of how this final fight sequence went down?
Again, like I said, my inner 12-year-old is thrilled to see, oh my God, it's Morbius teaming up with the Vulture. Oh my God, I don't have the same emotional connection to Hunger because he was a different era of Morbius comics. But you got to have a big climax, and I'm glad that, like I said, that you don't want the whole thing to suffer from originitis, where you don't only get the classic Morbius at the end. So nice to see Morbius in full Morbius mode in action there for the big finale and everything. Yeah,
because Hunger was about to take down the FBI agents, but luckily Vulture and Morbius intervened, and I really love the sequence where they're flying around through the city, and it's just really intense fight, and the setting looked dark, but it wasn't too dark to the point where you couldn't make out what was going on,
Yeah.
That's kind of a beef I have with other movies, but I think they handled it pretty well here.
And sometimes it's just a matter of sort of the coloring. The Underworld movies have this sort of bluish tone to them, that sort of, But yeah, you can usually see what's going on. The bluishness implies that, okay, you're not going to see a hint of sunlight in this movie, not a lot of bright colors,
Right.
But aside from, of course, brilliant blood red, of course.
Yeah, there was definitely some blood in the movie, but yeah, I thought they handled that very well. It
wasn't too gory.
Yeah, it wasn't just blood for the sake of blood. It was in moments where it made sense to show that these are vampires. This is what they do, and these are the stakes. Pun
He's
intended.
Got blood smeared all over his face and jaw sloppily.
Yeah.
It's hard to do a vampire movie without showing blood, although they managed to do it back in the 40s.
Yeah.
Those days are past, yeah. But yeah, I'm sure that was sort of, okay, how much blood can we actually show in a Marvel Comics superhero movie, since they don't tend to go for extreme gore. But it would be great to see Blade pop up. But again, I'm not sure the legal licensing issues there. I don't think Sony has access to Blade. Because Blade did not first appear in Spider-Man. Blade first appeared in Tomb of Dracula. He started out as a supporting character in Marvel's Dracula series.
I never knew that. I thought he might have had his own series, but that's really interesting that that's where he popped up.
They tried periodically to spin him off, but he started out as a supporting character in an issue as one of several vampire hunters chasing after Dracula in the old Tomb of Dracula series by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to read some more Blade if I ever get the chance at some point.
Well, the funny thing, Blade honestly went on to be a bigger deal, I think, in movies than he ever was in the comics. I don't think Blade. I like the character. I wrote Blade fan fiction as a kid. I think I wrote a Morbius versus Blade story. But in all honesty, Blade never blew the comic book world away. I doubt there was ever a Blade comic book series that lasted more than 6 issues. But boy, he found big success in the movies. Arguably the first successful Marvel movie, honestly, predating X-Men.
Yeah, because it came out in 1998, so it predated X-Men by a couple of years.
It's probably actually the first successful, we do not speak of Howard the Duck. It was the first successful big Marvel movie, you know.
Yeah, Howard the Duck is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. Like, I think it has some funny moments, but I can see how it falls short for, like, other people. Because, like, you used to read Howard the Duck, or maybe you still do, I don't know, so you probably know more about the character than I do.
Well, at this point, I'm going to be one of the snotty folks who went inside. I love the original comic book by Steve Gerber. So, yeah, when I saw the movie, it was like, they ruined the comic book. It wasn't as good as, you know. I'm sure if you see it on its own terms at an impressionable age, it's a fun movie. I was in my 20s, and oh my God, they dumbed down my favorite comic book. You know, shaking my head angrily and indignantly, you know. But, you know. No, Howard the Duck was the only comic book I ever actually subscribed to by mail, because for whatever reason, you could not find it in my neck of the woods growing up. It wasn't at 7-Eleven on the spin racks. This was before the days of specialty comic book stores. So I was just trying to follow it continuously. I knew one or two little mom and pop stores that had it. I broke down and actually subscribed to it. I got the issue by mail because, and I don't know why, but, you know, it was a mainstream Marvel comic, but it did not get displayed at drugstores in 7-Elevens along with Avengers, Captain America, and indeed, you know, Morbius, you know. So, yes, but I was a big Howard the Duck fan in the 70s. I even had my Howard the Duck for President campaign button, you know, and I was disillusioned by the movie because it was like this cliche, but I was one of the ones who went, it's not like the comic book, and I hated, you know, that was, I'll be honest, I haven't seen the movie. When did it come out? 1984?
86, I think.
I have not seen the movie since it first opened, and at the time, I, you know, took my Howard the Duck comic books very seriously, and I was offended by the movie, and I have not revisited it. Although, true story, I actually saw the movie twice in the theaters, only because a girl I liked wanted to see the movie too. So, okay, fine. You know, the things we do on dates, you know. To me, they kidified it, you know. But I was in my 20s. Okay, you know.
Yeah, I think I was in high school when I watched it, actually. And then I watched it again a few years later, I think.
Yeah.
So, like you, I've only seen it twice, I think.
Yeah. So I'm reluctant to, you know, discourse too much. I'm remembering my impression of the movie from close to 40 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So perhaps I should revisit it one of these days, you know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I did think it was hilarious when Howard the Duck showed up at the very end of Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, that was like one of the best post-credit scenes ever.
That was wonderful. And that's, again, I love the fact that the Marvel movies, and indeed even the DC TV shows these days, are casting a wide, oh my God, Howard the Duck, you know, is, you know, rehabilitated at last, you know, and bringing in all these sort of, you know, esoteric characters, you know.
Yeah, and did you see the Shazam movie from last year?
Yeah, I enjoyed the Shazam movie.
Yeah, I just loved how, like, that scene at the end where he just brought Mr. Mind, and it's like, lots of people probably don't know what's going on, but I love it.
Exactly, that won me over. Honestly, I was waiting the whole movie, hoping to God, I just love the concept of Mr. Mind. And I was just, please God, let they throw in I was hoping for that. And okay, I walk out the door happy. You gave me, oh my God, you gave me an evil worm. You know, that's what I wanted. You know, you've got your roots here. You know, and they teased Black Adam, and you know.
Yeah, I just love how the pendulum has like swung to the point where we can have like these dark and serious comic book movies alongside these like campier ones, with, like more obscure, weird ones.
Yeah, there's not just one definitive. Like I said, it was kind of bad back when, you know, the old days out west when there were lots of, we have to be campy. No, these days, you know,
like there's variety now.
It's like westerns these days. These days, superhero movies, comic book movies. You've got dark and serious. You've got funny and goofy. You've got wild, spectacular space opera. You've got grim and, you know, moody Batman movies, you know, weird stuff like Legion and everything. And again, that they're just, wow, ransacking 80 years of comic book history, and everything is fair game. I remember in the 70s, I used to get very upset because there was a wave of Marvel Comics adaptations on CBS, The Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, Captain America, etc. And back then, they seemed to be kind of running away from their comic book roots. They always kind of seemed vaguely embarrassed by their comic book because we got to tone down the comic bookiness. Part of that was a budget thing, but you'd read the Incredible Hulk comic book and he'd be fighting aliens and monsters and giant robots. And then, you'd watch the TV show and, he's dealing with teenage runaways and corrupt businessmen, Where's the leader? Where's the abomination? Why should he be shrunken and sent down to a microverse, for God's sakes? That was my response in the 70s. And we have at least moved beyond that. Nowadays, God, Infinity War, every superhero you can think of, and aliens and strange dimensions and, time travel and talking raccoons. And, I was watching Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. one night, and it was a throwaway night, but they referenced Hell Cow. Do you remember Hell Cow?
I've seen every episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I've forgotten some of it.
Well, it was a throwaway line of dialogue where somebody was going through a file and, what the hell is a Hell Cow? Hell Cow was a cow, an actual cow, who was bitten by Dracula one night when he was 13 and couldn't find a young virgin, and was turned into a vampire cow, complete with a black cape. And this is an actual Marvel character who has appeared. First appeared in Howard the Duck, by the way, and who has made appearing. So I think, oh my God, they actually referenced Hell Cow. That's a deep dive.
Yeah.
And I had to sort of pause and did they just reference Hell Cow? But who knows? Maybe we'll actually see Hell Cow someday.
Yeah, maybe they could put him in the next Morbius movie if they can work out licensing and whatnot.
I somehow think that Hell Cow may not be the right vibe for the dark noir, spooky Morbius movie.
Right, that's fair.
Like I said, Hell Cow first appeared in Howard the Duck.
Right.
It was an adversary of Howard the Duck. So, but if and when we get a new Howard the Duck TV series or movies, let's bring in Hell Cow.
Yeah, I'd be down.
I can almost see Hell Cow popping up in for God's sakes, a Guardians of the Galaxy movie or something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like now that these studios are embracing the comic bookiness more, the horror and the spacey stuff and everything in between. It's like now people can look back at some of the like you said, the CBS stuff and just watch it and maybe appreciate it still, knowing that they're not the final word on on-screen adaptations. I enjoyed the Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk series when I watched it several years ago.
I enjoyed the original movie. I enjoyed the show, but there was the comic book in me fan was always kind of frustrated by those CBS things because they were never as larger in life, ambitious as or as far out in comic booky as the comic books I was reading at the time, And honestly, I had the same response to the old George Reeves series. I watched the George Reeves Superman series, religiously as a kid, but there was always a part of me, well, where's Brainiac? Where's the Bottle City of Kandor? Where is the Phantom Zone? I love the far out comic booky stuff. I was always like, well, I always felt like the CBS stuff is like, well, what's the point of having the Hulk if you're going to stick it into a plot that you could do on Mannix or, Barnaby Jones?
Right. I did how they handled the fugitive on the run angle and emphasized how at the end of it all, even after he's done some good, he's still kind of a lonely man. So they got that down pretty well, but people would be missing the larger than life type of stuff. But now we're in an age where we're kind of spoiled, which is great.
No, on its own terms, and they made an executive decision on the Incredible Hulk that they were going to, for whatever reason, also just budget, that they were going to do what they did, and it actually worked on its own terms. I'm just saying the teenage Marvel Comics fan of me was always frustrated. Well, where's the leader? Where's the abomination? But the great thing is now we do live in a day when you can watch a Hulk movie and there is the leader and the abomination, and for God's sakes, you're watching a Black Panther movie and it's Man-Ape. Oh my God, they brought in Man-Ape. They didn't call him that, but it's Man-Ape. And oh God, Claw. And, we're getting Aquaman. I love the Aquaman movie. This is because, in fact, the great thing about the Aquaman movie is, again, we now live in an era when they're embracing all the most ridiculous parts of the comic book.
Yeah.
And I love the way the Aquaman movie in particular was genius to me in that it took all the stuff that everybody makes fun of the character and then shows just how cool it was. It's like, yeah, I ride a seahorse into battle. I talk to fish. I wear shiny orange armor. You got a problem with that? You know?
Yeah, like I've read the Aquaman comics from the New 52 era, and I'm making my way through the one from 1994 that I think was written by Peter David, and those are like a more serious interpretation. But by that same token, I also really love the cartoon Batman, the Brave and the Bold, where it has like the campy, over the top Aquaman, and it's just funny, and it's great that we have multiple versions of these characters.
There's a bit at the end of the Aquaman movie where Ocean Master, his villain, and again, we're getting a movie about the lost city of Atlantis and giant sea monsters, and it's the ages of the days of Bill Bixby realism are gone. At the end, Ocean Master puts on a costume that is the costume from the comic book, and I didn't realize how much I had been sort of holding my breath, waiting the whole movie for his evil brother Orin to, oh God, it's the Ocean Master helmet.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta hold your breath because much of the movie is underwater.
Unless you have gills.
Oh, true. Or unless your name is Gil. I don't know. I don't know.
Hey, the one character, we are digressing wildly here, but the one character I keep waiting for in the Superman, you know what character they've never done on screen to date?
Who?
When is Lori Lemaris, Clark Kent's old mermaid girlfriend, going to get her moment in the sun?
I'm not even sure if I've heard of this character.
Well, she's been kind of forgotten. No, it is official DC lore that in between Lana Lang and Lois Lane, Clark Kent's college girlfriend was a mermaid from Atlantis.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I admit this is a bit far out. There's perhaps a reason that every single live-action Superman movie has, and thing has skipped over. No, look her up, Lori Lemaris. She was his college girlfriend. She was a mermaid. And I remember, I still kind of resent Smallville in that, wait a minute, we got 10 years of young Clark Kent and you couldn't squeeze Lori Lemaris into one episode?
Yeah.
What's the poor mermaid got to do to get some love here, so.
Yeah, I mean, on Smallville, I'm of the opinion that they spend too much time on Lana Lang, but I digress.
But, look her up. She's true. But, yeah, I realize it's a bit of a stretch. You're trying to do a Superman movie. We will forgive Richard Donner for leaving the mermaid out. But, but at this point, it's like, oh, come on. Now these things are crazy enough. It's like, on the CW show, come on, we can get Lori Lemaris in here. We can, we're getting everybody else, Who knows? Maybe if I was in charge of the world, we're getting the new Clark and Lois TV series.
Yeah, Superman and Lois.
Right. Damn it, I want an episode where they run into his old girlfriend, the mermaid, okay?
That'd be, I'd be so down for that.
Lori Lemaris has been waiting for 50 years now to get her, spotlight. And those shows are just wacky enough. Again, the CW shows, I love them because, again, they're like, the Flash's arch enemy is a giant telepathic gorilla? Go with it, Infinite Earths, whatever. And Legends of Tomorrow, which I love, is just sublimely, oh my God.
Yeah, that's my favorite Arrowverse show because it embraces the ridiculousness to the full extent.
So, like I said, given that it's the same, let's hope that maybe Superman and Lois. I mean, how can you resist throwing in a mermaid episode? I mean, even Charmed did a mermaid episode.
Right.
But yes, Lori Lemaris unfortunately tends to get swept under the rug. But, look her up. She's canon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia article of her right now. I'll go ahead and link that in the show notes for this.
As far as I know, she's never even gotten an action figure.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yes.
Oh, apparently she made a cameo appearance in Young Justice. I love that show, but I guess I never noticed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, getting back to Morbius.
There are no mermaids. Yeah, I was grossly disappointed that there were no mermaids in Morbius. I think in the sequel, Martine should try to inject herself with radioactive fish blood. And then she can become the living mermaid.
Yeah, that'd be pretty wacky. So yeah, the movie ends with Hunger getting like defeated after this brutal battle, and they like lock him up and whatnot. So I don't know, maybe he'll come back in a sequel possibly, because I mean it's Matt Smith. How can you resist not bringing Matt Smith back? Like lots of people love him. We even get like this scene at the end where like Morbius is looking up at a rooftop and he's talking about how people who know that he's a vampire will continue trying to hunt him. And like there's speculation that this silhouette on the rooftop might be Blade, but maybe they're not sure if they can confirm it yet. And it kind of like mirrors that deleted scene from the first Blade movie that ends with Blade looking up at a rooftop and it's supposed to be Morbius up there. So I think it'd be cool.
I actually did not know about it. You actually told me about that. I did not realize they had originally intended to have Morbius pop up at the end of Blade. I'll have to check out that deleted scene one of these days.
Yeah, I found it on YouTube a while back, but yeah. So I don't know, it'd be cool if they could get like Morbius and Blade together in a movie. Like I think that'd be a cool way of like uniting the.
They have a history in the comics.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, a vampire and like the Daywalker. Yeah, it just feels like a natural fit, and it'd make a great on-screen story.
They're both kind of quasi-vampires.
Yeah, and we also get like this post-credit scene where like, you know, Michael Keaton / Vulture. I keep calling him Michael Keaton because that's how I see him. But yeah, he's acquired like the formula or whatever to like, you know, Morbius's experiments and whatnot, and he injects himself with like Vulture DNA and like starts turning into like a man Vulture type of thing. I thought that was a really weird.
What is that story with that mysterious cave anyway? There must be more to it. You know, the cave that Morbius goes to where you get his bat experience. You know, Morbius, unless I'm missing something, doesn't have a really established arch villain. I think, well, who are Morbius's arch villains? I can't really come up with them. He's, you know, been around for a zillion years, but I can't really come up. You know, it's like, okay, Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom, whatever.
Yeah.
And Hunger obviously was a major enemy of his, you know, but that's interesting because like usually it's like, okay, I can't. Maybe another Morbius expert could chime in at some point, but I don't think he actually has. You know, who knows? Maybe Venom, maybe Man Wolf, or I don't think he's ever had in this recent wave of Morbius comics had a female vampire hunter who blames him for the death of her father, and she's trained herself to become the world's greatest vampire hunter. At least that was the plot line they were doing in the comic books. Maybe they can ransack that idea too, you know.
Yeah, I suppose. Is there like anything else you would hope to see in a Morbius sequel?
Good thought. Like I said, I've always expressed, like I said, we'd like to see Blade. We'd like to see, well, like I said, I'm curious to see what they do with Martine going on. Does she become his adversary? Does she get turned into a monster or a vampire? In the comic book, she's been all over the place. She's been damsel in distress. She's been evil femme fatale. She's been, you know, heroic scientist trying to cure him. There's all sorts of ways to go. Who knows, you know.
Right, because like at the end of this movie, we're like not sure where Morbius stands with her. Really, it's kind of ambiguous.
Right. And where does she stand with the fact, oh well, you know, you're a bloodthirsty, murderous vampire? But
yeah, it might be a deal breaker for the engagement.
Yeah. So, but no, I'll find you, and I'll find the cure. I'll never give up on you. There's, you know, so, and who knows? Like they can combine characters. They can bring her in and turn her into a villainess or something. You know. They can conflate her with the new character. Well, honestly, in the new comic books, at first I thought when they brought in the evil female vampire hunter that she was going to turn out to be, surprise, she's Martine, but apparently she isn't. You know, I've actually lost track of the continuity. I think in the comic book she's died, come back. She's the, you know, Gwen Stacy of Morbius or something. You know? And it would be great, of course, if, you know, of course, what they have to do, and okay, I'm being silly here.
Bring in Spider-Man.
The very first Morbius story, issue 101, took place during that short-lived period when Peter Parker had 6 arms. He had, you know, literally at the end of issue 100, he took a potion to try to, like, it gave him, in fact, 6 arms. So Spider-Man had 6 arms, like a real spider. And I believe it was some sort of where he ended up needing to use Kurt Connor's The Lizard. This is the very, very first Morbius story. Ended up using some sort of weird enzyme in Morbius's blood to cure Spider-Man, so he only had 2 arms again. I think, okay, I'm sorry, we need to have Tom Holland running around with 6 arms.
I would pay top dollar to see that.
Go back and look at the cover of, you can link to this, Amazing Spider-Man 101. It shows Morbius fighting Spider-Man. And Spider-Man is a 6-armed freak, okay?
I would be unironically down to see that on screen.
Honestly, exactly. I think we need to see Tom Holland with 6 arms. And we have the technology, damn it. We can do it.
Yeah.
And he needs Morbius to cure him. That was actually the original plotline. So,
Yeah, I mean, with the way comic book movies are going now, it's like they could go in all sorts of directions. New Mutants has horror, so maybe we'll have more horror stuff. Like we've been hearing that the next Doctor Strange movie will have horror elements in it, and
definitely, yeah.
And I'm hoping that movie gets super weird and out there. Like going forward, Marvel should try getting even more ridiculous and really push the envelope of how much more comic booky weirdness.
Marvel has a whole Marvel horror universe that they can pillage and ransack for the movies. Yes, we mentioned before, Werewolf by Night, to a Dracula, Son of Satan, Ghost Rider, Man-Thing. They've got an endless array of, they used to publish Haunt of Horror, Vampire Tales, Dracula Lives, Tales of the Zombie. They got a zombie character. Marvel has a mummy character, the Living Mummy,
Yeah, and there's the new upcoming Hulu series for Marvel called Hellstrom, which I guess is horror. I'm not very familiar with it.
Probably, yeah. That's Damien Hellstrom, the son of Satan, who was one of Marvel's old horror characters and who got created around the time that Morbius was created. This was all when Marvel kind of, like I said, the comic code loosened up and suddenly you could have witches and vampires and all this occult stuff, which had been officially banned from comic books for about, 20 years.
Right.
Now, the Marvel monster boom kind of eventually collapsed. It just exploded for a while there. But it's still there. These characters are all there. I mean, Dracula has fought Spider-Man. Dracula has fought the X-Men. And Dracula has fought the Avengers. Blade was even a member of the Avengers recently in the comic books,
I feel like everyone has pretty much been on the Avengers by this point, right?
Well, I think, yeah, that. Or the Defenders, yes.
Right.
And many of them have gone back and forth. But yeah, so Marvel has a whole litany of Marvel characters. And Doctor Strange, like I said, is the entry point because Doctor Strange is the, brother voodoo. They've got lots of horror and sort of spooky, both Marvel and DC. DC's got their sort of spooky end of the universe of Deadman and Dr. Fate and Zatanna and the Spectre.
Right.
Adam Xanadu. And over at Marvel, you have, which again, they have barely been touched on so far, media-wise. I will not rest until we get a Spectre movie.
Yes.
And over at, Marvel, like I said, they've got volumes of Marvel horror comics and Marvel horror characters that they can exploit.
The Spectre got this animated short film. It was part of DC Showcase, and I was really impressed with it. If I remember correctly, I think it had a 1970s noir vibe to it. If it's the one I'm thinking of, yeah, I remember it looked really cool. I'd love to see that in live action, in that style.
Oh yeah, I'm still crushing. I mean, they dabbled with the Spectre a little bit in Crisis of Infinite Earths. Right. I want a full bore Spectre series involving the original Spectre. Not Green Arrow briefly becoming the Spectre.
Right.
Or
Jim Corrigan.
Yeah, I want Jim Corrigan and all that.
Right.
But hey, like I said, Constantine is all over the place these days.
Yeah.
Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol has their own TV series, which is weird. I'm a little late to the table here, but I'm presently sort of binge watching my way through the first season of Doom Patrol, which our local library just got in, so.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Doom Patrol is my favorite live action DC series I've seen.
I'm about 10 episodes through the first season now.
Okay, so you're about 2/3 into that first season. But yeah, I love Mr. Nobody and his fourth wall breaking and
they brought in Danny the Street. We were talking about esoteric characters who were now, whoever thought we would see Danny the Street,
right.
in live action here.
Yeah, I mean, all the characters are pretty out there, like
Yeah.
Robot Man, Negative Man, and like just and
Oh, I
Elastic.
love Rita.
Yeah, Rita, like she's great. Like I just
Oh, and
love the
oh
show.
dear, she just turned into a blob. Isn't that unfortunate? You know.
Yeah, and it's cool because like the show is strange, but it also touches upon trauma, so it has really
Yeah.
deep layers to it, and I just love it.
Yeah.
So, what are your final thoughts and score out of 10 for the Morbius movie?
Well, like I said, I've been waiting my whole life for the Morbius movie. I saw it on opening night and am now going to be, anxiously waiting for Morbius 2. They can call it Morbius 2 Adventures into Fear. Okay.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I'll give it a 9.
Oh,
Just
nice.
because I'm congenitally against actually just going for 10, except for really real superlatives.
Like, I rarely go to a 10 because there are few movies that are like that feel perfect to me. So like 9 is like really high up there, and that's like high.
Or maybe 8. Maybe we will allow for a certain grade inflation due to the fact that I'm a lifelong Morbius junkie. Okay, so.
I mean, you can do decimal if you want, and it's like you can rate it however you want. Like it's cool if you're like, yeah.
I think realistically, I think I need to revisit the movie and actually perhaps watch it a few more times before I can actually give it a final rule. I think a final rating. There's almost, I feel like I haven't fully experienced the movie yet, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there's some movies where like I watch them and I feel like I know my rating for them, but there are others where I feel like I need to watch them a couple more times to know for sure.
My rating for today may change when I actually get a chance to experience the movie a few more times.
Right. So I guess for you, it would hover around 8 or 9, maybe 8.5-ish, but
yes.
Yeah. But, so for me, I really enjoyed the like horror vibe that this movie took. It really took chances, like embracing that aspect of the Marvel universe. I enjoyed it more than Venom, which, I mean, I know you haven't seen Venom, but I thought the first act of Venom was hard for me to stay awake during the first act. So Morbius, I think I definitely enjoyed more than that. And I will give this a solid 8 out of 10.
Very good.
Yeah.
And who knows? Sometimes, like I said, the second movie is even better, like with X-Men 2 or Spider-Man 2. Maybe we'll make it to 9 or 10 for Morbius 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's really satisfying when you get a sequel that just raises the bar. So, like, hopefully we'll get something like that in the future.
One could also possibly talk about The Dark Knight as well. Yeah.
Yeah, or like The Empire Strikes Back. Like, there's a bunch of examples. Although I think I am in the minority of preferring Batman Begins slightly over The Dark Knight, but I still really love The Dark Knight.
Actually, I'm on the same page with you. I mentioned Dark Knight. I think the general popular wisdom is that The Dark Knight is the best of the three. But personally, no, my favorite is Batman Begins.
Oh, nice. Yeah, virtual high five with you. Yeah, because like maybe The Dark Knight has like some of the best performances, like especially with like Heath Ledger's Joker. But I think overall, I enjoyed the story of Batman Begins a little bit more. But
And I will recuse myself on the third movie just because I wrote the novelization of that movie, so I am famously fired.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that, but like I forgot like as we were like recording this. Yeah.
So clearly I have a soft spot for the third movie. Okay, since I worked on it for quite some time.
Right. And like out of your books, I've only read the Khan books from Star Trek Volumes 1 and 2. Those I really enjoyed those. And also Batman, The Court of Owls. I really enjoyed that one as well.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, that was Batman Court of Owls is very, very recent. And I put a lot of work into that one.
All right. So I guess while we're at it, where can people find your books, your work, and like, do you have like anything that's coming up you want to promote?
In November, it is a original Star Trek novel, Star Trek, the original series, A Contest of Champions. It's a brand new Star Trek novel. I describe it as my love letter to Dr. McCoy, and that's coming out in November. I should also, now that I think of it, actually have another thing coming out in time for Halloween. There's a small press book called Musings on Monsters, which is a collection of essays on classic horror, which brings us back to vampires. And yeah, I wrote an essay on comparing Boris Karloff to Bela Lugosi for that book. And it's called Musings on Monsters. And the plan is to get it out in time for Halloween.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about this one. I definitely remember the title.
Yeah, it's coming out from Sequart Press. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. And it's a collection of articles and essays on Frankenstein, Dracula, Dark Shadows, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Cat People, all sort of, your classic horror and monsters.
Right, and Rich Handley is editing that book, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Rich Handley, yeah. So that ties in because, hey, we're back to vampires again.
Yeah.
All roads lead us back to vampires.
Right, it's a blood-filled path, I guess. I don't know. I'm like trying to think.
However, I will say there are no vampires in my new Star Trek novel.
Well, maybe.
Sorry to break. No vampires, no mermaids.
Right. There was a salt vampire on Lower Decks, the cartoon. So.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. As for my plugs, I have a fantasy horror comedy novel called Lemons Will Make Rain, which also has vampire in it, and that is available on Amazon. People can find more info on that at stevenschinder.com. And listeners can follow me at Steven Schinder on Twitter and Instagram, Steven Schinder Storytelling on Facebook, and also at Culture Slate pretty much everywhere. That's the entertainment news site that my friends run, where I've been writing and editing some articles, so check that out. And discussing the latest episodes of Star Trek Discovery with Liana Ahmed. Videos go up on the Culture Slate YouTube channel on Fridays. And they also go up on, you can also go to channel1138.com/Star Trek Culture. And if you'd like to email Delayed Replay, you can send an email to delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. And we may read your thoughts on the show. Greg, thanks again for joining me on this episode talking about Morbius and I guess comic books in general.
And comic book movies.
Yeah, we went all over the multiverse, I guess. But yeah, it's just fun talking about that sort of stuff.
Well, it's an interconnected Marvel universe,
Right. All right. Without further delay, have a good day.
You too. Thanks for talking to you. Bye.
All right, I'll just tack this on, kind of like a post-credits scene type of thing. Hey everyone, this is Steven with a little correction for the plugs toward the end. So the title of the Star Trek book was actually called A Contest of Principles. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. I, of course, have the link in the show notes. And yeah, just read literature, I guess. Whether it be comic books or novels or what have you. Steven. Huh? Steven. Who said that? We're the evil worms inside your mind. Oh no. I remember now. We have reshaped you. No. What's going on with my skin? My teeth? What? Where's the mirror? What? No reflection? What have you done to me? I'm a vampire!